I've never seen my brother before. Stop asking. Han Tuo shook his head and smiled, his eyes filled with anticipation. His younger brother must have grown up after so many years. He wondered how his character and cultivation level were. Yi Tian smiled and said, perhaps he will fight with you for the family inheritance. Han Tuo shook his head and laughed. I'm not fighting. I'm not qualified, anyway. What family inheritance? A great Tao divine spirit asked curiously. They had always been curious about Han Tuo's background. Han Tuo smiled and did not say anything. Yi Tian was the same. He pretended to be mysterious. The three great Tao divine spirits looked at each other and stopped talking. Time passed. 100,000 years passed very quickly, but it was very torturous to Qingwaner. Hanju had been cultivating in seclusion and she didn't dare to disturb him. It was equivalent to her living alone for more than 100,000 years. When she was free, she would go to the tree where Liu Bei was previously and talk to the flowers to express her depression. On this day, Hanju opened his eyes. Qingwaner was cultivating at the side and did not notice that he had woken up. Hanju couldn't help but smile. This girl. He also heard the conversation between Qingwaner and the flowers and found it funny. Hanju called out softly, Waner. Qingwaner trembled as if she had been electrocuted and immediately opened her eyes upon hearing his voice. She looked at Hanju in surprise and pounced into his arms. Husband, you're finally awake. She felt extremely aggrieved. She had never thought that 100,000 years would be so torturous. Even now, she did not know how she had endured it. Hanju said earnestly, this is cultivation. I cultivated alone most of the time before I revived you. Qingwaner was silent. Qingwaner asked in surprise, really? Hanju stood up, and she followed closely behind. The two of them walked out of the Taoist temple. The two of them came to the tree. Hanju waved his right hand, and the flowers on the ground turned into men and women. They were all young. There were more than 100 of them. The 100 or so transformed living beings looked at each other in confusion. Hanju began to preach the Tao and activated their intelligence. Then, he taught them language and cultivation techniques. Qingwaner was also immersed in it. Hanju only spoke for half a day, but the transformed living beings felt like a long time had passed. This is your queen. You have to listen to her here in the future, understand? Hanju instructed. More than 100 transformed living beings hurriedly knelt to Qingwaner. Qingwaner smiled and asked them to stand up. Hanju turned around and left, leaving the rest to her. These living beings did not have the power of creation, so their cultivation levels were not high. With Hanju's cultivation level, it was as easy as flipping his palm to turn stones into spirits. However, if they wanted to be like Qingwaner, whose body directly had the cultivation of an immortal emperor, Hanju had to use the power of creation. Qingwaner had already reached the deity realm after 100,000 years. The physical potential created by the power of creation would not be bad. Furthermore, Qingwaner's soul had been tempered by the nebulous primordial qi for millions of years. It was even more impressive. Hanju teleported to the second Tao field and called Murong Qi to receive the new fiend celestial. Liao called Tao Comprehension Sword out and wanted to be alone with Hanju. Tao Comprehension Sword blushed and fled. Hanju understood Liao's thoughts. Wasn't it just a Tao discussion? 10 years later, Hanju left, and Liao called Tao Comprehension Sword back. Tao Comprehension Sword asked about the cultivation situation. Liao smiled and said, I'll be able to attain the Freedom Realm soon. Wow! So powerful? Sisterly, tell me, should I Dao Comprehension Sword squirmed as she recalled what the Black Hell Chicken had said to her. Dao Comprehension Sword nodded and began to feel nervous. On the other side, Hanju was reading the emails in the third Dao field. Recently, Han Tuo and Yi Tian had been very active and were often attacked, but they were not severely injured. Their Providence became stronger through battle. Hanju also noticed an email. Your good friend ancestor Shitian has absorbed the inauspicious evil and his cultivation has increased greatly. What was the ancestor doing? Previously, he had absorbed the dark power. Now, he had absorbed the inauspicious evil. Why did Hanju feel that the ancestor was constantly turning more evil? He pinched his fingers to deduce and discovered that he couldn't deduce ancestor Shitian. It seemed that this fellow had a Dharma treasure. Interesting. Hanju had no intention of dissuading ancestor Shitian. Everyone had their own path. No matter who left, the chaos would still exist. Perhaps ancestor Shitian could create his own path? Hanju looked at Jiang Juesher after reading the emails. He thought for a moment and sent a dream to him, using his old image. Jiang Juesher opened his eyes and fell silent when he saw Hanju. Although he was silent, his eyes were filled with nostalgia. Hanju said, "Disciple, how have you been all these years?" The difference in cultivation level between the two was too great. When Hanju used the Dark Nightmare, he also used the power of the Confusion Fiend Celestial to numb Jiang Juesher's senses and mind. This was not the first time Jiang Juesher had dreamed of his master in the cycle of reincarnation. He wasn't on guard and talked about his experiences over the years. After a long while, "Master, I'm doing very well now. I have a place to cultivate in peace. I'll revive you one day." Hanju raised his hand and taught him a mystical power. Jiang Juesher was caught off guard and fell into a daze. He woke up after a certain period of time. Liu Bei, who was beside him, asked curiously, "What's wrong? Your mind was not here just now. This is not good. You'd have been attacked if there were enemies around." His great reincarnation creation technique was extremely profound. Even he did not dare to confirm its upper limit, so anything was possible. Liu Bei nodded and smiled. If this universe gives birth to living beings in the future, what kind of creation do you think is better? Jiang Juesher was silent. He had been in the universe of stars for a period of time and also felt that this universe had great potential. We can imitate the heavenly Tao, but we can't walk the heavenly Tao's path, Jiang Juesher said in a low voice. Liu Bei asked curiously, "What path do you think we should take?" Jiang Juesher replied, "The world is divided into levels. Each level is differentiated by more levels. The cultivation level of each major realm is divided into 4 realms. All living beings will put cultivation level and ascension as their goal. This can reduce internal friction. You can arrange the galaxy distribution and form an overlapping state. Every realm has a huge restriction. You have to reach a certain realm before you can encounter the heavenly tribulation and transcend it. Once you succeed, you are not allowed to descend into the mortal world to prevent breaking the rules." Liu Bei fell into deep thought. Hanju had already promised him that he would build this universe in the future, so he would think about this question when he had nothing to do. It had to be said that Jiang Juesher's suggestion was very good. After ascending, they were not allowed to descend into the mortal world. This could prevent experts from occupying cultivation resources and harm the younger generation. Liu Bei said, "I think it's feasible. We can force them to transcend the tribulation. When they reach a certain realm, they have to transcend the tribulation." Jiang Juesher smiled. "Not bad, not bad." The more they chatted, the more excited they became. At the same time, outside the universe of stars, rolling black mist was surging over, as if darkness was devouring space. It was terrifying. In the Taoist temple of the third Tao field, Hanju had yet to enter his cultivation state when he noticed the black mist outside the universe. At a glance, he saw countless vengeful spirits roaring silently in the black mist. Inauspicious evil? The invisible inauspicious evil had nowhere to hide in Hanju's eyes after he reached the great Tao Supreme Realm. Hanju suddenly focused on one of the inauspicious evil. He was different from the other inauspicious evil. He contained dharmic powers and his vitality was hidden in the depths of his soul. This person seemed to be the leader of the inauspicious evil. His cultivation level had reached the early stage of the freedom primordial chaos realm and was not considered powerful. Hanju didn't attack. He could use the inauspicious evil as Jiangju Escher's whetstone. Cultivating alone would easily numb him. It was also a good thing to experience battle occasionally. Not long after, Jiangju Escher and Liu Bei sensed an enemy attack. They arrived outside the universe of stars. Jiangju Escher frowned. This was not the first time he had encountered an inauspicious evil. The black mist contained a dense ominous aura that made him very uneasy. Liu Bei was the same. They chose to escape when they encountered inauspicious evil in the past, so their expressions were extremely ugly now. What should we do? He wanted to escape, but the two of them had been discussing how to build the universe, so he felt a little ashamed now. Liu Bei said, "Let's fight. No matter where we go, we might encounter inauspicious evil unless it's the domain of a mighty figure." He took a deep breath and was not worried. After all, Hanju was here. However, Hanju had yet to make a move. Perhaps he was in seclusion. Thus, they could only resist until he exited seclusion. Jiangju Escher looked at him in surprise. He already knew Liu Bei's personality. To put it bluntly, he was afraid of death. Liu Bei forced a smile and said, "There has to be a goal to work towards. Otherwise, why would we cultivate?" These words shocked Jiangju Escher. That's right. What was cultivation for? There was no peak in cultivation. Why did he cultivate? Jiangju Escher was not confident. Jiangju Escher suddenly thought of the Heavenly Tao's Divine Might Heavenly Sage. The Divine Might Heavenly Sage was also in existence who cultivated diligently all year round, but in the chaos, many cultivators were puzzled as to why he protected the Heavenly Tao. The Heavenly Tao was created by Pango and had been fused by the Tao ancestor. No matter how strong the Heavenly Tao was, Providence would not fall on the Divine Might Heavenly Sage. Jiangju Escher seemed to understand at this moment. Liu Bei was the same. Liu Bei's voice floated over, "Fellow Taoist Jiang, can you fight with me? You can escape if you really can't win." Jiangju Escher hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly. He twisted his neck and stretched his arms, then smiled and said, "Then, let's fight. I haven't fought for hundreds of thousands of years." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they rushed into the black mist in the depths of the void. Soon, the battle erupted. In the third Tao field, under the tree, Chingwaner suddenly stood up and looked up at the starry sky. The 100 or so transformed living beings did not sense the danger outside the universe of stars. They were still playing. Because they were not humans, their growth cycle was extremely long. They were still young after 10 years had passed. Already at the deity realm, Chingwaner could see the void outside the universe of stars. She saw Liu Bei and Jiangju Escher using their mystical powers in the black mist. Her beautiful eyes widened as she hurriedly returned to the Taoist temple. "Husband, outside." Seeing that Hanju had yet to enter seclusion, Chingwaner said anxiously. However, she thought that Hanju's cultivation was stronger than hers and he definitely sensed it, so she didn't finish her sentence. Hanju chuckled. Those two are protecting this universe. Chingwaner was stunned. Protecting? That black mist is an inauspicious evil. The inauspicious evil is an evil vengeful spirit in the chaos. It specializes in attacking living beings. You can't see them or capture their aura. Chingwaner was surprised. She asked curiously, who are those two? Didn't you say that you're the only one here? Hanju smiled. One of them is a clone I created in the past, and the other is a disciple I want to nurture. By the way, this disciple of mine thinks I'm dead. Chingwaner was even more curious and hurriedly asked him to clarify. Hanju didn't hide anything and told her about Liu Bei and Jiang Jueshi's backgrounds. Liu Bei was formed by the enemy's body. Jiang Jueshi's experience was more surprising. Hundreds of thousands of reincarnations. How many years did it take? Chingwaner found it unimaginable. They're so powerful. Are they Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals? Chingwaner asked curiously. She had heard of Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals in the immortal world. They were the peak of immortals. Hanju smiled and said, they're sages. My disciple even surpassed normal sages. Sage? Chingwaner was surprised again. Hanju said, above the immortal emperor realm is the deity realm, and above the deity realm is the Zenith Heaven realm. Above that are the pseudo-sage, sage, and freedom sage realms. Chingwaner asked in surprise, your disciple has already reached the freedom sage realm, but you're still lying to him. Aren't you afraid that he'll take revenge on you? Hanju said, because I've surpassed the freedom realm. Hanju saw the change in her expression and was secretly pleased. He looked at the battle outside the universe and smiled. My disciple is quite capable. It seems that I don't need to do anything. Husband, how strong are you now? Chingwaner grabbed his arm and asked curiously. Hanju pretended to be profound and said, I can't tell you. I'm afraid it will scare you. Cultivate well. You will reach my level 1. Day. Chingwaner asked, what about Tuar? He's also a freedom sage. My son is so powerful? Chingwaner was extremely excited. She was even more surprised than when she learned of his cultivation. Hanju curled his lips in jealousy. Indeed, this girl still cared about her son the most. Another one? Hanju was helpless. Although he only had 2 children, it was already enough to give him a headache. His eldest son, Han Tuo, was outside and refused to go home. His youngest son's potential was too strong and was stuck in his mother's womb for millions of years. Hanju said, haven't I already created so many living beings for you? Isn't it enough to relieve your boredom? Hanju hesitated. Chingwaner continued to persuade him. Husband, I'll take care of the child since you usually cultivate in seclusion. Hanju couldn't dissuade her and felt that it was feasible. With his current cultivation level, there were not many existences in the chaos that he was truly afraid of. It was not troublesome to have a few more children. Fine. Husband is the best. Chingwaner pounced into his arms and started to pull his clothes. Hanju was speechless. So urgent? The battle outside the universe isn't over yet. You've already surpassed the freedom realm. What are you afraid of? Your disciple is a major realm weaker than you. Even he can resist the inauspicious evil. At that time, you can wave your hand and the black mist will probably disperse. Continue reading on myb0xn0vel.com. You're quite open-minded. Of course. I've never been worried ever since I married you. Anyway, I'm not afraid even if the sky falls with you protecting me. Forget it, forget it. As you wish. Outside the universe of stars. Jiangjuesher sat in the void and a huge shadow that emitted a dazzling light condensed behind him. This huge shadow was similar to him. It spread its arms and its dermic powers transformed into white rings of light that swept in all directions. The white rings of light directly dispersed and were unstoppable the moment they touched the black mist. Liu Bei stood beside Jiangjuesher and looked at him in a daze. This kid's potential. Liu Bei was envious and shocked. Hanju had mentioned to him that Jiangjuesher's potential was terrifying, but he didn't expect it to be to this extent. Using Providence to suppress the enemy. Powerful. Liu Bei was stunned as he stared at Jiangjuesher's side profile. For some reason, he thought of Hanju. A cry suddenly came from the black mist. Who are you? Jiangjuesher did not answer. Instead, he raised his right palm and pushed forward. The huge shadow above him waved his palm. The dazzling light on his body turned into a pillar of light and rushed over, directly destroying the black mist near the direction of the sound. Jiangjuesher slowly opened his eyes. Not a bad mystical power. Jiangjuesher muttered to himself, extremely excited. Although he often created mystical powers, those that could destroy inauspicious evil were definitely ranked in the top 3. Liu Bei praised him. Fellow Taoist Jiang, what a good mystical power. Jiangjuesher smiled. Do you want to learn it? I can teach it to you. More inauspicious evil will definitely attack again in the future. Really? We're brothers. Why would I lie to you? Thank you, fellow Taoist Jiang. True. The two of them looked at each other and laughed. They were both in a good mood. Inside the Taoist temple, Qingwaner and Hanju tidied their clothes. Qingwaner rubbed her abdomen and looked happy. Hanju could see that she was already pregnant. A third primordial fiend celestial couldn't be born with Xing Hongshuan's son around. Hanju said, by the way, she can only be ranked 3rd if my daughter is born. I have a wife who is also pregnant with a son. Qingwaner was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't help but ask, where is she? Why isn't she with you? She was not angry or jealous. It was normal for men to have multiple wives in the immortal world. As long as they were strong enough, even women could have many husbands. Moreover, 5 million years had passed and she was already dead. It was not unreasonable for Hanju to find another wife. In another Dao field. She's busy cultivating, Hanju replied. Qingwaner smiled. Then, it seems that I have to work hard. I can't let you think that I like to slack off. Hanju smiled and touched her head. I'll go back to cultivate. The battle outside has ended. Qingwaner nodded and walked out of the Taoist temple. Hanju smiled. He was looking forward to his youngest daughter. Qingwaner gave birth to her daughter in Hanju's Taoist temple a year later. She didn't feel any pain with her cultivation level. She was fine after giving birth. The youngest daughter was very lively. Her cries were loud, causing the other living beings outside the Taoist temple to discuss. They all knew that the queen was about to give birth to a daughter, and they were also looking forward to it. Hanju rarely ended his cultivation early. He took his swaddled daughter and showed an expression of adoration. Did we disturb you? Qingwaner asked. Hanju smiled. It's fine. I'll spend 100 years watching her grow up. It's fine. Qingwaner was pleasantly surprised. Hanju said, let's call her Hanqinger. What do you think? Qingwaner understood the meaning of the name and smiled happily, nodding in agreement. I'll bring you back to the immortal world to have fun when she starts to learn. You've been revived for so long, it's indeed boring. It's been hard on you. It's good that you know. Qingwaner curled her lips. She was indeed a little aggrieved. She had the mentality of a mortal before. Who could withstand letting a mortal cultivate alone for 100,000 years? However, Hanju could say it. Her grievance instantly turned into sweetness. Then, Hanju and Qingwaner walked out of the Taoist temple and introduced their daughter to the other living beings in the third Tao field. These living beings were very excited and wanted to hug Han Qinger. Just like that, Han Qinger grew up happily being loved by many people. Although her potential was sealed by Hanju, she was still outstanding. She could fly at the age of 1 and breathe in spirit qi at the age of 3 to cultivate. At the age of 5, she had already reached the nascent soul realm. On this day, Hanju brought Qingwaner and Han Qinger to the main Tao field. The 5-year-old Han Qinger wore a green lotus dress. Her small face was exquisite and cute. She had inherited Hanju's appearance. Although it was still inferior to Hanju, it was enough for her to be loved by everyone. Hanju saw that Xing Hongxian was still meditating after he entered the Taoist temple. Qingwaner was nervous, but Han Qinger did not show any fear as she stared at her. She smiled and said, "This must be Sister Qingwaner?" Hanju had already sent a voice transmission to tell her about this a year ago, so she was already prepared. Qingwaner immediately relaxed upon seeing her smile. The two women chatted enthusiastically. Xing Hongxian looked at Han Qinger behind Hanju and smiled. "Qinger, call me eldest mother." Han Qinger tilted her head and asked curiously, "What do you mean by eldest mother? Isn't there only one mother?" "Eldest mother?" Hanju found it funny. Xing Hongxian picked her up and smiled. "Your mother and I are both your father's wives. I'm also considered your mother." Qingwaner was secretly puzzled. Eldest mother? Continue reading on myb0xn0vel.com. Xing Hongxian met Hanju earlier than her? She suddenly thought of something. Before he met her, Hanju's identity was very mysterious. Could it be that Xing Hongxian was already following him back then? It was very likely. Qingwaner did not ask. There would be plenty of opportunities in the future. She was not jealous of Xing Hongxian because she was very passionate. She even took the initiative to chat with her daughter and showed them kindness. After chatting for a long time, Qingwaner asked curiously, "Where's your son? Didn't husband say that you also have a child?" Xing Hongxian touched her abdomen and smiled. "Here. He's not born yet." Qingwaner was dumbfounded. Not born yet? She couldn't help but look at Hanju. Hanju said, "This child is a little special. He has been nurtured for a long time and has yet to be born. However, according to the time he was nurtured, he should indeed be Qinger's elder brother." My elder brother? He's still in the womb? Then, shouldn't he be the younger brother? I want to be the elder sister. I want to be the elder sister. Han Qinger shook her head and shouted. She reached out to touch Xing Hongxuan's abdomen with a look of surprise. Xing Hongxian smiled and said, "All right, you can be the elder sister, but as the elder sister, you have to take care of your younger brother. In the future, you have to give in to him in everything. If he's the elder brother, he has to take care of you and give in to you in everything. Do you want to be the elder sister or the younger sister?" Han Qinger tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then, "I'll be the younger sister." Qingwaner couldn't help but laugh. Xing Hongxian rubbed Han Qinger's nose and smiled. "Looks like our Qinger is very smart." "Of course, I'm the smartest." Han Qinger smiled proudly. Hanju stood at the side and smiled at them. They left 2 hours later. Hanju brought the mother and daughter to Xian Qingjuan's Taoist temple. Xian Qingjun was also his Tao companion. The two of them had already done it as husband and wife. He had also told her about this a year ago. Unlike Xing Hongxian, Xian Qingjun was already waiting for them in the Taoist temple. Although Xian Qingjun was not as lively as Xing Hongshen, she still made Qingwaner feel close to her. She even gave her a Dharma treasure. However, Hanju felt Xian Qingjun's meaningful gaze before leaving. Xian Qingjun also wanted a child. She had been rejected by Hanju before. Now that she saw Han Qinger, she naturally had some thoughts. The three of them came to a human town. Looking at the passers-by, Qingwaner was stunned. Too long! The scene in front of her made her want to cry. After 5 million years, her old friends and relatives had long turned to dust. Han Qinger was very excited and kept shouting. Hanju brought them around. The immortal world was vast. Hanju planned to travel the world while waiting for Han Qinger to grow. A year later, they returned to the city they had lived in back then. However, this place was already barren. There were mountains and weeds everywhere. Qingwaner stood on the cliff in a daze. Han Qinger flew around in the forest and even asked Hanju to chase after her, but he ignored her. Hanju came to Qingwaner's side and said meaningfully, "Time is like this. One day, you will get used to it." Qingwaner turned to look at him and asked, "So you were also very calm when facing me back then?" Hanju replied calmly, "That's right." "Humph, then why did you lie to me and say that you only encountered an immortal encounter after I died?" "Sure." Qingwaner's low spirits vanished and her eyes lit up. Hanju looked at the sky in despair and said, "I was born in a mortal world below the immortal world. My parents were slaves in a herb garden outside the sect. When I was young, they fled the herb garden and left me there alone." Qingwaner frowned. She didn't expect him to have such a miserable background. Time passed minute by minute. Dusk descended. Han Qinger appeared behind the two of them with a wronged expression. She had left for half a day, but her parents did not look for her. Hanju held her hand and continued talking to Qingwaner as he walked. Qingwaner seemed to be listening to a story. She was so engrossed that she didn't even care about her daughter. Hanju finally finished several days later. She suddenly felt ashamed. Hanju tried his best to revive her and let her cultivate, but she couldn't tolerate it. In the past, Hanju didn't have anyone to protect him. Unlike now, she only needed to cultivate and didn't have to worry about anything. "Father! Mother! Are you done chatting? I'm bored to death." Seeing that the two of them were finally silent, Han Qinger immediately threw a tantrum and shouted unhappily. These days, she spent most of her time sleeping. She had no choice. She didn't understand her parents' words and was not the least bit interested in them. Hanju pinched her face and smiled. "Qinger, how about I bring you to see your niece?" "Niece? What is a niece?" "Your brother's daughter." "Oh, I want to go. Bring me there." Han Qinger immediately became excited. Qingwaner asked in surprise, "Tuar has a daughter? She's still alive?" Hanju smiled. "That kid is like me. He doesn't care about his daughter at all. If not for my help, your granddaughter would have died long ago. By the way, you originally had a grandson who died millions of years ago." Qingwaner frowned. Hanju didn't say anything else and brought the mother and daughter to the netherworld. They arrived at Yang Tiandong's King of Hell Hall. Yang Tiandong was cultivating. The hall was silent and there was no ghost servant around. "Father, who is he? He looks so terrifying." Han Qinger's voice woke Yang Tiandong up. Seeing Hanju, he was stunned and his mind went blank. "Moss! Master! Master! Master!" After a moment of shock, Yang Tiandong hurriedly came to the King of Hell's table and knelt in front of Hanju. Qingwaner and Han Qinger were both a little nervous. After all, Yang Tiandong had been the king of hell for millions of years. His pressure was still very strong. Ordinary people's legs would go weak when they saw him. Hanju said, "Get up. How have you been all these years?" He could deduce Yang Tiandong's experience, but it was better for him to say it personally. Yang Tiandong suppressed his excitement and said, "Day after day, I deal with the reincarnation of the netherworld. Although it's boring, it's safe. I can also spend time cultivating." For some reason, Yang Tiandong inexplicably wanted to cry when he saw Hanju again. He was the king of hell. How could he cry? However, he couldn't control his emotions. He thought that Hanju had already forgotten about him after millions of years. That's right. There were many geniuses in the hidden sect, and there was no lack of heavenly Tao sages. What was he? Although he usually pretended to be lazy, he was actually very disappointed and regretful every time he heard about the geniuses of the hidden sect. Hanju said, "This is my wife and this is my daughter, Han Qing'er." Qing'er was caught off guard. When she first saw her disciple, she should give him a gift, just like Shen Qingjun. Hanju smiled and said, "All right, there's no need to be polite. Call Han Xinyuan over." Yang Tiandong hurriedly agreed and went to summon her. Han Qing'er asked curiously, "Father, who is he? He looks so fierce." Hanju said, "He's father's first disciple, but father hasn't seen him for a long time." "Why not?" "He's like you. He likes to run around too much." "Huh? That's right. Daddy will never see you again if you run around in the future." Hanju's words frightened Han Qing'er. Her eyes instantly turned red and tears welled up. Qing'er rolled her eyes at him and said angrily, "Why are you scaring her?" Hanju smiled. "I'm not scaring her." Qing'er was stunned, while Han Qing'er cried in fear. Hanju was amused. This girl was usually too lively. He should teach her a lesson lest she ran away at 17 or 18 and brought a man back to propose marriage. Although Hanju didn't want to care too much about his children, he hoped that Han Qing'er could focus on cultivation. The higher one's cultivation level was, the more good men they would encounter. Of course, there were bad men no matter what realm they were at, but at least Hanju hoped that she would suffer less. She would find someone weak to marry if her cultivation level was too low. They wouldn't be able to escape death. At that time, she would have to beg Hanju to save her husband. He brought Han Qing'er to meet so many old friends to nurture her judgment. It was not that Hanju looked down on mortals. In any case, when he was a mortal, if a fairy loved him, he would definitely be afraid of attracting trouble. He wouldn't dare to accept it unless the other party forced him. Not long after, Yang Tiandong brought Han Xinyuan over. He walked out and waited outside after leading her into the hall. Han Xinyuan was puzzled, but she was suddenly stunned when she saw Hanju. Hanyu. Her descendant was already a sage. No, it was not Hanyu. A face that had almost been forgotten by Han Xinyuan appeared in her mind. Her father, Han Tuo. She asked curiously, "You are?" She thought that Hanju was Han Tuo's son, but he was definitely not simple to be able to call the king of hell and make him avoid suspicion. Qing'er looked at Han Xinyuan and her heart melted. She seemed to see Han Qing'er growing up. She immediately went forward and wanted to hold her hand. However, Han Xinyuan dodged warily. "Oh, you're my granddaughter. Why are you hiding?" Qing'er pouted. "Granddaughter?" Han Xinyuan was stunned. She subconsciously looked at Hanju. Hanju said, "That's right. Han Tuo is our son. The king of hell who just went out is my disciple." Han Xinyuan widened her beautiful eyes. Her past doubts were immediately resolved. No wonder young Tiandong took such good care of her. In the past, she had been worried that young Tiandong would have improper thoughts about her. Later, she discovered that young Tiandong was a little careful when taking care of her, afraid that he would cross the line. She had thought that it was because of Hanyu, but in the end, it was not. Han Xingyuan was at a loss for words. Han Qing'er came over and smiled. Are you my niece? Niece? Han Xingyuan looked at the young Han Qing'er and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She could tell at a glance that this girl was only a few years old. Han Qing'er began to talk to Han Xingyuan, interrupting her thoughts. Qingwaner also stared at her with pity. The three women chatted happily. Hanju didn't want to disturb them and walked out of the hall. He appeared at Yang Tiandong's side, frightening him so much that he knelt again. Hanju raised his hand and forcefully lifted him with an invisible force. There's no need to be like this. Are you really distant from me? Hanju said helplessly. Young Tiandong did not know how to explain. He indeed did not dare to relax. The person in front of him was the immeasurable merit divine might heavenly sage. The most powerful existence in the entire heavenly Tao. How could he be rude? Hanju said, I'll make you a sage. After so many years, your temperament should have been tempered. You have to cultivate diligently in the future, understand? Young Tiandong was flattered and hurriedly thanked him. Hanju was speechless. Why was he kneeling again? He couldn't be bothered with young Tiandong. Instead, he asked about the heavenly race and the calamity race in the netherworld. When young Tiandong talked about the netherworld, he immediately became familiar with it and talked non-stop. He was now the leader of the King of Hell, so the merit of managing the netherworld was naturally on him. Hanju listened quietly. 2 hours later, Hanju left with Qingwaner and her daughter. Young Tiandong and Han Xingyuan stood in front of the King of Hell's hall and looked in the direction they had left for a long time. Han Xingyuan asked, King of Hell, who is my grandfather? Why haven't I heard of Han? Zhu! Young Tiandong laughed secretly. You've never heard of Hanju, but have you heard of the Divine Might Heavenly Sage? However, Hanju didn't take the initiative to say it, so he naturally couldn't spill the beans. He's very powerful, anyway. Not to mention you, even your father benefited from his reputation. Otherwise, your father would have long died and not even had the chance to give birth to you. Hanyu should have been wiped out, too. It was also my master who helped him, young Tiandong said meaningfully, causing Han Xingyuan to fall into deep thought. Sage. However, there were too many sages now. Han Xingyuan didn't know which sage it was. His master became more human-like after gaining a daughter.